Well, I would like to welcome you to the inaugural Digital Ocean Cluster Briefing. We greatly appreciate that you find time to join us despite the usual rush before the winter break. My name is Anna Patrick, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Digital Ocean Cluster. I would also like to welcome Patrick O'Keefe, who is the co-founder of the cluster and who will be moderating this briefing together with me, and Nele Tiedemann, who had a key role in organizing this event. Thank you for this, Nele. The Digital Ocean Cluster was created in September 2020, and it aims at bringing together leading experts from academia, the private sector, government entities, and international organizations to discuss and also to explore topics that are related to the increased digitalization of the world's oceans. One of the activities of the Digital Ocean Cluster are the Digital Ocean Briefings. The format is quite simple. Each briefing opens with a 15 minutes presentation or talk with an invited guest. The following 15 minutes are dedicated to a Q&A session to ask your questions or to comment on aspects raised by our speaker in the second half of the briefing. You can use the chat function or you can just take the floor and jump in. I'm very happy that Dr. Alix Valenti accepted to be our first briefing guest. Thanks a lot for dedicating your time to this network. I can now spend the remainder of the time listing her many achievements and highlighting her various experiences relevant in the context of the digitalizations of the oceans, but I will remain brief. After completing her PhD in post-conflict reconstruction, Alix started working as a defense and security journalist, focusing mostly on naval procurement and technological developments. Over the past year, she has also worked as a strategic communication manager for Bureau Veritas Marine and Offshore, a classification society, writing white papers on different topics, notably on cybersecurity and also digital classification, so quite on topic. For the rest, I refer you to Alix's website, which will send the link through the chat in short. For this inaugural Digital Ocean briefing, I will now leave the floor to Dr. Alix Valenti to set the scene. Alix, based on your experience as a journalist and with Bureau Veritas, could you give us an overview on how you see digitalization being understood in the maritime world specifically?
Yeah, hi. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me and for the honor of being the first guest of these new briefings. It's a pleasure to be here. And also thank you for the raving review. I hope that we haven't set the standards too high. Perhaps to begin with, I was thinking, because we had this conversation amongst ourselves already, even before the briefing, I thought it would be good to talk about the definition, because we talk about digitization, digitalization, and we're never too sure which one applies to what, if they're interchangeable, if they aren't. So I really wanted to do that, to look at this as part of setting the scene. And having a look at the different definitions online, whether it's another journalist looking at this or it's a website for a specific purpose and content, I noticed that there are three different terms that revolves around the digital, and they are actually referring to different situations, and they're not interchangeable, as we've all thought at some point. I know I have for the longest time. So for instance, digitization is actually, I would say, probably the first step, and the one that we've taken already quite a long time ago, all of us, which is effectively the process of changing from analog to digital. So it's digitizing information, not the processes, not the business. It's really just analog to digital. So it's what we've done when we moved from our cassettes that we had to rewind with the pen to the CD, which we could happily scratch. And then The other thing that I wanted to say was digitalization. So digitalization is the next step forward, which looks at using digital technologies to change business process and provide new revenues, or you can also look at it as implementing, effectively just implementing digital technologies. And automation is a big part of this. So when you talk about the digitalization of classification, for instance, it's the process of using technologies like the digital twin for what they call 3D classification and for predictive maintenance. And if you look at the defense world, which I am most familiar with, you also look at, if you think automation, you look at autonomous vehicles. So that's also part of digitalization of the oceans and the maritime world. And then the last step in all these digital process is the digital transformation, which goes even deeper compared to the other ones, and it's making change in itself a core competency of the enterprise and becoming customer driven. So it's really facilitating. So it facilitates digitalization, but it's not to be confused with digitalization. So you may have digital technologies, so you've digitalized, and some more work is being done by the machines, but that doesn't mean that you have undergone digital transformation. That's really when you start going more in depth. So a nice summary that I found on the web was: you digitize information, you digitalize process and roles, and you digitally transform a business and its strategy. So I thought that was quite nice, because it fits quite nicely into what we want to discuss in these briefings, and it sets the scene quite nicely also with regards to what I wanted to discuss, which was, as you said, as you rightly pointed out, I've been a defense journalist for the last 6 years. Time really flies. And also I worked for Marine and Offshore at the Marine and Offshore division of Bureau Veritas. And so I've seen kind of two sides of digitalization of the ocean. And as far as shipping is concerned, obviously what I was talking about before, when you look at classification, which is the process of making sure that ships meet all the standards set by the industry. I worked on the paper actually for Bureau Veritas on this, and they had, as part of their process, they had 3D classification, which was the idea of having this tool, this collaborative tool that everyone, BV on one side and their clients on the other, could use to look at the comments on the design of the ship and say whether this was fine, or you need to change this for it to be up to standards. Then they had also what they call remote and augmented surveys. So when they do every year the routine survey, in a way, of a ship, or every 5 years the more in-depth survey of the ship, using more remote technologies, so drones that can go into very confined spaces, or that can go underneath the ship, if you're thinking about underwater drones. And using those tools to facilitate the work of the surveyors, and also go faster and be more precise also at times. And then the last thing they had was predictive maintenance, which is also something that we find as a nice transition into the military world. But I'll come back to that. And then the other thing that I found very interesting in the shipping world when it comes to digitalization was that there's a lot of autonomous shipping coming up, especially in the Nordic countries. If you look at Norway, they really have developed properly this process of having autonomous ships going from one place to the next, and autonomous systems also for how do you say, taking the containers, and then placing them in the ports. So yeah, so already plenty going on. I mean, everyone says that shipping moves at very slow pace, which I find to be true most of the time. but they've caught up. They're catching up, and there are interesting things coming up. And then in the military world, another domain that can be construed as being quite slow in its way of evolving and catching up with technology. I find that's a bit unfair in terms of digitalization. There's a lot going on as well. So I was talking about predictive maintenance before. I've seen a lot of shipyards using the digital twin technology. So it's the perfect replica of your ship with all its systems that you have on your computer. And same story, when the ship comes into, all the sensors are connected to this digital twin, and then it can show in real time how the systems are performing, and then if something is about to reach a specific time where it needs to be verified, or if it's looking like it might be failing soon. So it's being used, the digital twin and the predictive maintenance is making sure that it's not that you're wasting time, but you're not organizing the check of the ship at a specific set time, but rather you're using all these tools, all these sensors to make sure that you're ahead of time in terms of what could happen to your ship and to your systems. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of autonomous systems also in the defense world. We're seeing them. I mean, I've looked at naval, obviously, and we're seeing a lot of surface vehicles that are coming up, especially for mine countermeasure missions. And then we see also underwater vehicles that are being developed. Those ones at the moment are used mostly, they're used from surface platforms, but they're also going to be increasingly used with the new generation of submarines as detached sensors from the submarines, so being sent ahead of the ship or the submarine to see the situation, what's going on. So and then a last point that I wanted to bring up was what they call network-centric warfare, which is this process of having all these ships, so the surface ship, the underwater platform, the helicopter, all of these are being connected with sensors, and all this information being processed at crazy speeds from these new computers that they have on boards, and showing almost real time the situation. Well, they'll tell you real time, I think it's close enough, the situation, and being able to make fast decisions, to decide whether you need to engage, whether you can just change course, whether it's an enemy or a foe. So all of these connected sensors are really part of the digitalizing of the naval domain in defense. So yeah, this is how I've seen it in the last few years.
Thank you very much so far. And starting off also with the concept of the terminologies. I mean, as a starting point in general. So as it seems, there's a huge variety of different interpretations and uses of the terminologies. Is it, for example, we have seen this with the autonomous systems, automatic, autonomous, but also what you have just said is very interesting. From your experience, I think it must be very difficult actually to cope and grapple with these issues and addressing challenges ahead, and in this field, in maritime sector, but also coming to shore. What do you think? How are all the different actors working together on these issues?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I don't want to use too much time. I mean, we really want to give time for people to intervene afterwards, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of people who will have comments about the definitions or what I'm about to say. From what I've seen, and I want to stress what I've seen, not that I'm saying that it's like this everywhere. You look at industry. I work a lot with the industry, obviously, as a journalist, and you see that most of the, in fact, I think all of the big industry players in the defense world, at least, they often have retired military personnel working with them that can give them, you know, the operational background, the situations, the needs. So there's a very big emphasis on, which is obviously important. I'm not diminishing that in any way, shape, or form, but there's a very big emphasis on what the need is. It's like, you know, when you work on your PhD and you're constantly reformulating this question, but you're still not finding the answer to it. And it feels like it can be a bit like this as well. These industry players are big machines. It takes a long time for they have the money for innovation, but sometimes it takes a long time for this innovation to come through, and it's also a lot of money into one project, and you'd better hope, you know, that this one project is the one that will answer your customers' needs, and that can sometimes come across as, you know, a bit of a risky play. And I find that something that can really help is bringing in also other actors, you know, other key players. And we don't think about it enough, but academia can really be a key player in this. Academia, universities, I mean, it depends how you look at it, but they're not brought in enough because there's this perception that academia is, you know, just research and churning out papers that's, you know, are not maybe relevant to, you know, concrete things going on in the world. But I've seen examples of the opposite, in fact, of universities and academia really making a difference, and I think there should be more of that going on.
Oh, okay. Again, thank you very much, and also to have a smooth transition towards the Q&A phase, and to give also our participants the floor. I have another question also, continuing this idea of working together with so many different actors in a very huge domain like the maritime one. So do you have, from your experience or what you have seen, do you have any recommendations how to bring the different people together, for example, academia and so on? Also the same we can see in the cybersecurity world, where we can have people coming from various entities, especially from entities you usually are not introduced in this sector. So do you have any experience with this one, and recommendations also for our participants and viewers for this one? Thank you.
Yeah, you like the tough questions, Patrick. I've seen a couple of interesting things. I mean, obviously what we're doing here is, I think, very important. Bringing people together from very different backgrounds and very different fields and key players. But if I had to think of two examples, I think well, one is a project that Anna and I have submitted a grant for actually recently, so we're hoping it will come through. But you know, you think about all these autonomous ships, and they're being used for defense, but they're being used also for security. And what happens if, you know, the person perpetrating an offense is in one place, but then the offense is being perpetrated somewhere else with an autonomous system, and who has jurisdiction, you know? And you know, if you have, you know, you're seeing more and more these little submarines that are being used for smuggling drugs. They travel miles under the water. So when it comes from a country somewhere and then it's being picked up in another country, can you board that submarine? I mean, in a way, not board, but you know, if you intercept it, who's the person that you talk to, and then how do you prosecute? Who has the jurisdiction for that? So the project that we were looking at with Anna, this is one tiny bit of it, but it's like, how do you look at international law and what exists at this point in time and try and adapt it to the situation? And I think, you know, for this project, we want to bring in people from all sorts of different backgrounds, including industry, to talk with them about their projects and where they're looking and where they're going and how this will impact law enforcement. And the other way around as well, you know, they want to know how what they're doing might impact law enforcement later on, and who is using their systems. So that's one project. But another one that I'd seen a long time ago, and I was thinking about this while preparing, and I would like to catch up with them to see how it's going. It was with the Office of Naval Research in the US, and they were setting up this research where, it's not research, it's called Hacking for Defense. And they want to really tap into the knowledge that you have and the wealth of research and excitement that you have at university with all these young students. So they do workshops with them, and sort of the equivalent of hackathons almost, where they put to them problems that you could find in the defense industry, in operational situations, and then tell them, okay, so what solution would you come up with if you had this problem to solve? And of course, they're not going to save the world right there and then with a workshop, but many ideas come up, and then maybe a few of those can be brought into a lab to try and develop them, and then maybe after that you can extract more information, and then again slowly you narrow it down, and you may have out of 100 projects 2 projects that are really right on targets. So that's another way in which you can bring industry and universities together and develop new systems and or rules.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's a lot of work to do, I guess. That's why I'm really happy that we're starting off, at least from the share we can provide and how we can participate and maybe improve the communication. That said, I would like to also include in this conversation the questions from the participants. We already have one from Michael Bergman. I would just read the question, and hopefully you can take over and give us the full disclosure answer. So Michael says, I agree that maritime is really waking up to the digitalization. The issues of large organizations is the same also in other businesses and modes of transport, but still shipping seems to be more risk adverse and careful in innovation. How do you see the risk for shipping on exactly that, being risk adverse and slower with innovation and other actors in the multimodal transport chain? Thank you, Michael.
So hang on, that was
yeah, that's a big one.
Question. How do you see the risk for shipping on exactly that, being risk adverse and slower with innovation than other actors? To be honest, I wouldn't know. It's a very tough question, and it's something that we tried to deal with when I was at Bureau Veritas. Even just from the communication side of things, is trying to do something new and having people say no, but this is too far. I guess the easy answer would be it's slowly, the process of repetition, obviously constantly repeating that things need to move forward, that comparison as well, looking at other other industries and saying, look, this is happening there, and then it's working and it's not bringing in risks, and I think in that way comparing shipping and defense is quite good, because defense can be risky. People's lives are at stake, and yet they're trying slowly in their own way to become more innovative and to look at innovations with all of these autonomous systems, but at the same time security. So how to make sure that the people who use them are secure. But again, you think about autonomous systems, you think about what does that mean in terms of ethics and how they're being used. So again, the first thing that comes to mind is bringing in universities who can think about this, whose job it is to think about these things also. So it's a slow process. It won't change from one day to the next, but my answer would be just repetition, keeping at it, and bringing in examples from other fields in the way that we're doing now.
Thank you very much for that question and the answer. Now we have several other questions, and in kind of increasing complexity already as it is, I like the question from Piero Messina, coming from the European Space Agency. is, for example, how would space systems and as data provided by space systems would enhance or support the maritime world and also support the digital revolution or evolution in the maritime sector? Me personally, like the question also, as we are bringing in another domain in this one.
Well, actually, you know, I'm going to be very cheeky, Patrick, and I'm going to revert this one to you because space is your field. I mean, you're the one who told me all about, you know, China looking into space and maritime and space going together. So I think this is more your realm.
To be honest, I think that's exactly and specifically why we should and why we are having meetings like this, because you have your background, especially focusing on the maritime sector. I have a background in something in a different area, and from my experience, I can say we have always nothing new. We have always met people who have worked in a different field. But the beauty of it is when we are having a dialogue, and then we can explore the different perspectives. For me, it was a strong message when I was tapping into the cybersecurity world. From everything I have seen in the space and also maritime sector, it just changed in the cyber world because they were approaching the same questions from a totally different angle. And I can say what we have seen in the maritime world, for example, the terminology, and we cannot do much today, but starting with the terminology, in the maritime sector, we are used to work with terms of maritime situation awareness or maritime domain awareness. We have tons of discussions in the differentiation between of those. We see this the same thing in the space environment, space situation awareness, space domain awareness, now growing more as a term. In the cyber world, they were looking at it from a totally different perspective, and it was very helpful and healthy to tap into that world and then to go back into my own world in the space sector. So, okay, taking over the question from you back to me, my recommendation would be to look somewhere else. First, look somewhere else and to see how they would look at the maritime sector, and then come back, okay, what would be needed? Going back to Piero's message, question, actually, it's a integral part of the revolution in maritime sector, from my opinion, because more than 70% of the surface of the ocean is covered by water, and the most sensible way to get in touch with the vessels at sea is via space. So therefore, this whatever happens into space now, you can call it new space or small satellite revolution, it will be the fundamental framework for the digitalization of the oceans. So not spending too much time in my own answer here, I'm going to the question from Rasmus. Okay, many good wishes to France. I have a question. For instance, in the Arctic, there's both energy, shipping, and defense activities by the West, Russia and China. Education and research cutting across the West, Russia and China is very valuable. I take part in it much. However, much of this digital ocean technology is dual use. How to apply and develop this potential dual use technology across the West, Russia, and China, for instance, in the Arctic? We're going to another level of complexity here, and I'd like to hand over this question to Alix. Thank you, Rasmus.
Well, to be honest, I think if I had the answer, I would already have the Nobel Peace Prize. It's a good question. To be honest, it's again, and you'll see here that I'm a big fan of the power of repetition, but I do think it can't be political because this is where they dislike each other very much. So this is not where the answer lies, I don't think. I would have looked at this as a more of a bottom up kind of thing, and perhaps trying to create more synergy between, how do you have the industry from Russia and China and the West talking to each other when they're so secretive, especially when it comes to the Arctic? But perhaps at the academic level, starting the conversation there and maybe breaking down some barriers there, and then perhaps go from there, from academia to industry, exchanging, broadening the exchange there, and then slowly bringing these together, and then at some point try and hit the political jackpot. But that's a tough one.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess we should also maybe look into 2021 and focus one of our sessions particularly on that question. So I think this is one of the beauty of this session here, that we also see what kind of questions could create a whole session for the future. And I already see we are getting more and more questions, but also looking at the time, especially since also referring to Anna's introduction, trying to keep it short and brief, the DOC briefings. I would like to take one question from Maura at this point and then hand over to Anna. The question from Maura Zara, if I say the name correctly, I'm sorry if not. Do you think that the investments in the digitalization from governments could change the current geopolitical balance in the maritime traffic? Oh, that gives a different angle into as well. Yeah, Alex, there you go.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely would be the short answer, obviously. But well, I think it's a very interesting question in the sense that it would bring the two aspects that I talked about, you know, both defense and maritime. Because even if you just look at the Strait of Hormuz, where a lot of the maritime traffic goes through, and all of that area where there are a lot of sea lines of communications and all this maritime traffic coming through, you know, you have these ships that are incredibly connected and can do incredible things, but if you jam them, they're completely lost. So if a government in anywhere in the world, really, I'm talking about the area because I'm looking at my map and I see it, but if a government is investing in jamming technologies and any other technologies that can sort of confuse this maritime traffic, then obviously it's a game changer in terms of protecting sea lines of communications, in terms of trades. So you're changing trade, you're changing how it's done, you're changing routes, possibly also if it becomes impossible going through somewhere. So it can have a significant impact, I think.
Thank you very much for this Q&A sessions, starting off with the terminology and now already approaching geopolitical issues on a global scale. Very interesting. Thank you very much for the time. I'm handing over to Anna for the closing notes.
Thank you very much, Alex. Many thanks also to the audience for all the interesting questions. We have more questions than time, but I guess it's a time to say thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the briefing, and the next briefing will take place in January. You will certainly hear from us in due course. And we are also happy to hear from you if you have suggestions for speakers, for topics, or also regarding the format of these briefings. We will soon launch the website of the Digital Ocean Cluster. We would like to start thinking about how we could expand the activities of the network, especially in these difficult times of limited travel. And one idea would be to organize so-called Digital Ocean Cluster coffee breaks, which will provide a platform to getting to know each other and to have an informal chat and exchange of ideas. So also any kind of feedback on this idea is more than welcome. In short, there is more to come, and we are happy, as mentioned, to receive suggestions and feedback. And on this note, I would like to close the event. I wish you a wonderful winter break, hopefully with some snow, at least in some regions of the world. And most importantly, stay healthy. Goodbye, thank you, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.